Hey, Tim, by the way, before we go, Steve just came out here.
Okay.
What's
And
up, Tim?
Good morning, sir. How we doing?
Good. How are you doing today?
Doing just fine. Can I introduce you to the audience that may see
Yeah.
this?
Yes,
All
please. Go
right. Well,
ahead.
actually, I'll tell you what, Charlie, you introduce him to the audience that may see this.
Introduce me.
okay, well, this is Stephen J. Ledbetter from Knoxville, Tennessee. Birthday is in September of 71. He's a whatever your sign is. He likes
Virgo.
long walks in the park and 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 little thin gals. Anyway, I'm just effing around now. But he's my housemate. We are both in
Recovery.
recovery in a housing from Sauna Lake Recovery, which is the recovery center that both of us went to inpatient. They have this apartment that we're currently in that they provide as a way so we don't have to isolate and be alone at home because I've got my own place. Steve's from Knoxville, but he and I've been here since January 22nd. So this has been what? This is January to February, February to March, March. 3 months we've been living together. And just last week, we had an opportunity to move into a two-room jobber, or excuse me, two-man jobber versus the four-man jobber we were at, which was on 4 flights of stairs. Kind of hard on me because of my cramps, hard on Steve because he got ran over by a car in 21.
In 2020, yeah, in,
2020.
Columbia, Missouri.
Yeah, and it messed up his leg. So this is better for us older folks to be closer to the ground floor, and not to mention now it's just he and I instead of four of us, which four of us wasn't bad. It's just that this way it's a little less, I guess, keep up, and we're a
Right.
little more like-minded being our age. So yeah, but I won't talk about Steve's personal stuff. I'll let him tell you.
Well, Steve, did you want to do that episode here today with Charlie? Or
Sure, that'd be great. Yeah, definitely.
okay, well then we can pivot on this.
You may want to scoot. Yeah, there you go.
Or I don't know how I'll publish this one, but we'll make that work. So, Stephen, what we'll get into, of course, how you met Charlie, but what I guess tell me about your childhood, how you got to the career. Remind me your kind of briefly what your story is.
Well, yeah, I was born in South Bend, Indiana. I was born 9/6/71. My parents are from Kingston, Tennessee, outside Knoxville. I don't know why we were there, and um, my dad some work he had in out there in Notre Dame or South Bend, Indiana. We were there till I think 3 or 4 years, and I might be off a little bit there, but moved back. I think we were in Rome, Georgia, for about maybe a year, and then back to. Then I grew up basically in Knoxville, Tennessee. Great parents. My dad, a great man. I have an older sister, upper middle class. Went to middle school at Cedar Bluff, and then pretty much moved to Bearden. The friends I fell into, my sister graduated from Bearden. She's about 3 years older than me, and really she was into track. She was really good. She played basketball. I grew up in a sports family. I love sports a lot. Big diehard Chiefs fan. Love the Chiefs. I'll get into that, but got a good upbringing, and I just fell in with the wrong crowd. I went Farragut High School. I think it was my sophomore year in the summer or after my freshman year. We started following. I got into the Grateful Dead big time. It was about, we had the VW van, Birkenstocks, the whole thing now. People are now into Fish widespread. I don't like Fish, but I like widespread a lot. I saw them a lot. But yeah, following the Dead. A friend of mine, Tad, he had the VW van, and we did that thing for a couple of summers, and got into the restaurant industry. And that's when I just got molded, I would say. In my opinion, not to sound pretentious, but I thought I was a pretty good cook and chef, whatever, self-titled chef. Did some schooling, worked under some great chefs, worked at Naples Italian restaurant for a long time. Copper, anybody knows Knoxville, Copper Seller organization, some local places around there, and just got molded, started with hallucinogenics, the drug history, LSD, mushrooms, weed, marijuana, but I was more of a drinker. I liked alcohol, drinking on the weekends, maybe a night during the week, but Friday night, go to a keg party, drink as much as you can drink, maybe smoke some weed, throw up, wake up the next day, what kids do, unfortunately, but that's just what they do. And my sister went to UT, University of Tennessee. She she's very successful, lives in Atlanta, Georgia, in Smyrna. And, but I got into just a lot of the restaurant industry, moving from, and just getting lost into that, being ignorant, using, it just really, just really got up there into using almost every night, getting off from working 8-9 hours and going to the bar. There's bars in Knoxville that treat the restaurant employees, that's where everybody would hook up. People would get to know each other and drink till 3 in the morning and really start it all over again the next day, get up at 2 in the afternoon. And that's how my drinking really got put on the map. But, and I have 2 boys. They live, 2 sons, Kellen and McCain. Kellen turned 25 a few days ago. McCain, he's 22. He'll be 23 in August. I love him a lot, man. Miss him. I haven't seen him since 2018. I talk to him a lot. I've definitely let him down. I feel like been an absent father. Shout out to my parents. They go by grandma and grandpa. If it wasn't for them and their mother, Cindy, we were together, I guess. We lived together for about from 96 to she graduated. My ex-wife, her mom, Cindy, she graduated from UT. She got her education. She was a nuclear engineer. So we moved out to Syracuse, New York for a couple of years. That was a transformation there of just a lot of snow. But I came back to Knoxville. And then Kellen, my oldest son, was born in Syracuse, but at St. Joseph's Hospital. But McCain, he was born in Farragut, Tennessee. They call it West Knoxville. But yeah, family. Like I said, my mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, they helped us out a lot. I'm very thankful. I don't really tell them this. I have my mom, my dad, and I. Our relationships kind of strained, and I don't blame him. But he was a great father to me, and I took advantage of it. I was spoiled. I got everything I wanted, pretty much. Before high school, I was into skateboarding. I was into comics there for a couple of years, fell out of that. I was into the X-Men, Brian and Claremont or whatever. Then I, started getting into girls, and everybody in junior high, middle school, like 7th, 8th grade, were big into Powell Peralta, Madrid, Sims, Zorlak. Everybody's bringing their boards to school. It got to a point where you could not, you can't bring skateboards anymore. They just outlawed that, finished that off at that school. But, got into high school, just raised hell, had to go to a private academy for a while, finished that. But going back, met Cindy at the Underground in the old city in Knoxville, Tennessee. We hooked up and lived together for 97, 98. She graduated. Let's go to Syracuse. We got married in end of 98, I guess, 99. And Kellen was born. We moved back to Knoxville. Again, my mom and dad really helped us out. We lived in, I can't remember the neighborhood in Farragut. But anyway, it was right next to Foxden. Had a good house, 2 Rottweilers. Again, my parents really helping out. I went to cooking, Cindy was working, was a nuclear engineer, very smart.
Well, let me thank you for sharing all that. Tell me about you. You kind of said that we going to Syracuse, New York was a bit of an awakening of sorts.
Yeah, it was different.
What did you mean? What did you mean by that?
The people there were very like just kind of passive, kind of like a passive aggressive type thing. But it was just really cold. I felt like I said, I grew up in the industry and restaurants in Knoxville. Knoxville's got a lot of restaurants, and I felt like in Syracuse, I was pretty much the head chef at this place in Carrier Circle called Green Onion. They're paying me $660 a week. I was off Saturdays and Sundays. To that point, because I didn't want to work weekends because I grew up working every Friday and Saturday night, and I was not expendable growing up, but couldn't take those days off, Friday and Saturday, because I'm big into NFL, college football, and I just wanted those off. But yeah, Syracuse, it was just really cold. You had Canada. We went to that Woodstock. We were at the '99 Woodstock. That was
Okay.
where everybody was burning everything, smashing
Yeah.
everything. Everything was so expensive. It was a money grab for the people who started, whoever was running it. But
Was
we
that
were
the
there.
infamous Corn concert or not?
Yeah, the Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and then I think the Chili Peppers ended it, and they did it with Jimi Hendrix Fire. But before that song, everybody was really fed up because for almost 3 days, water was. I'm exaggerating here. It was $10 a bottle. Pizzas, personal pan pizzas were 10, 12. It's just crazy, man. And it was just so hot, and it was just people ran out of money, and the artists there, the musicians were kind of pushing it on. I'm not saying all of them, but there's a couple bands that, like you said, really angst. Let's do something.
Right. Well, walk me through when your history with substances began in the Knoxville restaurant industry.
Yeah, I would say about 90, let's say 94.
How old were you?
Let's see, I'm 53 now. So I was what, 20? I'm not great at math.
Minus
20,
31, 53, 20,
22.
something like that.
Yeah.
Early 20s. Anyway.
Yeah, I was drinking lightly every night, on the weekends, but every night started, you get off work, in the restaurant industry, I was always in the back of the house. I tried waiting tables. I cannot, somebody's rude to me, I'm going to say something. So I was back there, throwing saute pans, putting some anger out, unfortunately. And I asked for forgiveness to some servers if they ever watch this. Gave them a hard time, but
Yeah.
I like throwing pans around. I was big into sauteing, grilling. Worked at Bistro by the Track, Naples Italian restaurant. A lot of places in the old city. Regis, I worked there in 96, 97. Kitchen manager. Some people I knew. I grew up at West Hills Baptist Church. There off West Hills in Knoxville, and a few people that grew up in the Regis Corporation. They knew me, knew my mom, so I kind of clicked with them.
And was alcohol like your biggest thing?
Yeah, drinking. Yeah, alcohol at the time. Like I said, marijuana. No, but I had some accidents. Opioids is what up to now. I'm in my DOC, as they like to say, drug of choice, is no doubt opioids. I'm in recovery from heroin abuse. When Oxycontin came out, mid 90s, late 90s, I guess I should say, and I got turned on to that big time. I just liked the way I felt, the way it just gave me that feeling of warmth, and I could just understand things. Felt like I could, for me anyway, it felt like I could put myself out there, and I was more of a, let's go do this, do that, and also benzos. unfortunately, which I think is right up there with fentanyl, benzos. You mix benzos and alcohol. Benzos are Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan, Valium. There's probably another one. Mixing that with alcohol, I think, is just right up there with fentanyl. It's deadly. And, you just do things you don't remember. If you're an aggressive person like myself, uh, you will act out on the way you see things. If normal, sober, you would do, you know.
Well,
So, but I got,
walk me through your journey. Walk me through
what's
your
that?
journey. Walk me through your journey into kind of getting lost in those things and the path that led you ultimately to meet Charlie. Were you at Sauna Lake or did y'all meet in the recovery house?
Yeah, so back in 2018, I got into sober living. A friend of mine turned me on to his name was Bubba. I lived there for about 8 months. I worked for shout out to a chef of mine, Duron Little. He has a restaurant. I don't know if it's still there, Seasons. Worked there. Still, I was sober for about 8 months. And then some of the sauces we use alcohol like liquor and stuff. And yeah, we had a bottle of Jack Daniels, and that's where I fell off. I just started hitting that a couple nights a week, going to bars, and start drinking again. And my mom and dad have some property in Kingston, Tennessee, and I was living there. And my dad was just saw that I was falling back into that deal. He just I got some money. He gave me this Ford Taurus, and he just told me to, get lost, basically. And I don't blame him. Um, I don't at all. I was just thinking of myself, being selfish. So I stayed at a friend's, kind of started drinking, getting real heavy, and met somebody, and they needed to get out to Columbia. And it just got in my head. I'm a big Chiefs fan. I became a Chiefs fan back in 89, 90. The Marty Schottenheimer era, Derek Thomas, Neil Smith, all them.
And just to clarify, that Columbia is in Missouri, Tim. So that's where
Yeah, Columbia, Missouri. So my goal was to get to Arrowhead. I wanted to work there, during training camp, cook, do that. But then I was in Columbia, and the pandemic hit. And there had never done crystal meth. And this guy, we became real good friends. I moved in his 2-bedroom apartment. I can't think of the street we lived on. It was a really bad street there in Columbia, but notorious street where the church is for the homeless people. But anyway, I got integrated to the homeless community in Columbia. It's a big one. A lot of crystal meth, a lot of opioids, a lot of alcohol, and fell into that. Met a girl, shout out. She unfortunately committed suicide, Raven. We got really deep. She ended up hanging herself. My procrastination, I think, trying to get her off the streets, I fell short, and her killing herself. I kind of blame myself, my procrastination for that. But I got into shooting dope, heroin and meth, really hard. We're talking 2 to 3 times a day. I had abscesses up and down my arms. I was hitting my legs, my veins on my legs, staying in motels if I could get some money from some friends, or, I eventually got out of that apartment and started living in a
Yeah, I
tent.
was going to say, how were you affording the habit or
Well, here it
whatever,
goes.
whatever
So
we
when I
call it?
moved in with Robert in that neighborhood near the bus station in Columbia, he was a veteran. Um, and this is gonna look bad, and I'm not gonna say his last name, but he taught me. He's like, we partied for about 4 or 5 days, and then I got up that morning. Always was an early riser. He was too. He got up, and he's like, you can just stay here. I'm gonna go fly a sign. And I was like, flying a sign, what he was doing? He was getting benefits from the VA, getting, money every month. It would hit, but he would go on the street, flying a sign, holding a sign, homeless, help me out, or, money, basically hungry. That was flying a sign in Colombia. A lot of people, a lot of tent people out there lives in tents do that. And I just was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And I was making 70, $80 a day for my dope. Some days were 150. we were out there for 3 to 4 hours. And at the same time, my mom was helping me out. I would go pick up money at Walmart. She was wiring money and to give him for rent. I did not work. I was going to go work at this country club out there in Columbia. I can't think of the name. This is back in 2019, 2020. And cannot think of the name of that. So I just didn't work. That was my income. Unfortunately, going to quick trips. I hate to say this. I hope Charlie doesn't think less of me, but stealing.
No judgment here, buddy.
Being selfish, being hateful. I'd go into a quick trip, and the quick trip there on Clark Lane was very busy. I mean, it was so easy to walk in, get a 12-pack. My drink was Miller Lite, stand there in line, look at the doors, just walk out. I would probably do that 2 to 3 times a week. There's beer, there's alcohol. The money we would all make, people in that acre, there's like in this wooded area, there's like 30 of us with 10-man tents, buckets to crap in, just pretty much living off the grid. And it was fun. I'm not going to lie. It was fun there for about a month or two.
What happened with the fellow Robert that you were staying with him?
Yeah, I just kind of like I said, I met this girl, Raven. We got really close. So my relationship with Robert kind of deteriorated from there because he did not like Raven. I guess she wouldn't give it. I mean, this girl, I'm not going to lie, man. She failed out of art school. Let's see, I was 49 at the time. She was like 39, 40. This girl looked like when Miley Cyrus cut her hair short, really better looking. I thought I like Miley Cyrus. She reminds me of her, but she looked like that. And she was dumpster diving. And I was sitting there like, this girl, this really attractive girl, is jumping into a dumpster, and all the stuff she would find. I couldn't get it out. I don't know. To me, at the time, it was intriguing for me. I just thought it was weird, but at the same time, kind of like, why is she doing this? But we got really close, and she ended up committing suicide. It really, I really still haven't gotten over it, to be honest with you. But I knew I needed help. I had gotten COVID. I knew I just felt really drained for a couple of days. So I went to the Mizzou hospital, the university hospital, and I stayed there for about 10 days. This is when COVID was really, I guess this was 2020. I was there for about 7 or 8 days, caught it again. And I just knew I needed help. I was telling the people there at the hospital how I was living, drinking 12 to 18 beers in a 24-hour period, maybe eating, if at all, once, shooting up methamphetamine, getting roxycodone.
And so what happened with Raven? Did you move out of Robert's place and
yeah, Raven and I lived in a tent.
In a tent? Okay,
Yeah.
got it. And did she end her life in a tent, or was it
No,
somewhere?
she went over to a friend's house, and I was actually, my mom, Raven and I got in an argument, so she left. I was trying to get money to get an apartment, get her off the street, get me off the street, try to get clean, which is hard. It's almost impossible. Anyway, I got some money, went to the Red Roof Inn out there in Columbia. There's one really notorious one. And I was there for about 48 hours, came back. I was hanging out with Sean, and Wendy told me that she had hung herself. And I'm not gonna say his name, and his girlfriend, their house, they found her. They went to Taco Bell, came back, and they found her in a closet. And yeah.
I'm very sorry to hear that. I don't love that you necessarily feel responsibility for that.
I just feel like my procrastination, I'm really bad at that. I guess I mean, for me,
in addressing an issue you noticed with her, or what do you mean by procrastination?
Well, I was trying to get us off the streets. I was
Okay.
trying to, get an apartment, and it just, weeks would go by, and
And you feel like that because you weren't in an apartment yet, that it made her kind of go
Yeah,
off
I
the
think
deep end?
she just said, screw it.
Well, tell me about that experience, not necessarily related to Raven, but you mentioned the difficulty trying to get clean on the streets, and then of course, I imagine the added difficulty trying to get off the streets and clean. Um,
Right.
Tell me how that went for you from living in a tent to aspiring to better yourself.
How I got there, how I got to rehab, or
Yes, sir.
And you
How
and
you
you
fa-
and
how
you
you found yourself help?
and you also said that while you were living in a tent is when you went to the hospital because you had COVID.
yes,
And then where did you go after the
I went
hospital?
back. I went back to the tent.
Gotcha.
I just, yeah. And I was hanging out with friends, Wendy and Sean, and they had a dog, Husky, they called it. And another couple of weeks went by, and I just knew. I sat flying a sign. I was like, I can't live like this anymore, man. This is ridiculous. So I walked to one of these recovery houses they had. Again, it's really foggy, but they found, let's see, where was that? Anyway, I went to Valley Hope. I call it the trifecta. I went to Valley Hope, got kicked out of there.
Is
I'm
that
like,
is that a treatment
it's a
center?
treatment center. I think it's in Boone County. It was set up right. I mean, not to hope Sauna Lake people don't get mad at this, but I kind of think it's a better recovery deal than Sauna Lake. Sorry, I do. Food's really good there, but and I just like the way they had it set up. Felt like school almost. You met at this big room. They had made you keep a notepad. Everybody was telling you what you needed to do for that day. Stephen Ledbetter, you need to do this. You need to be this person. You're, da 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 da. And me and this black guy, just he was in group. Taught, just he had two sides, and I'm a very abrasive person. I'm not afraid to tell people what I think. A lot of people have told me I have Asperger's. I don't know if I've never actually one doctor diagnosed me as that, but I will tell you what I think of you. And Charlie has told
Yeah.
me that I'm cynical. I really don't know the definition. I'm very critical. I mean, you got to prove for me. You got to prove yourself to me. If you're going to be around me, you got to prove it. I I don't know. So being here in sober living's been a difficult one for me, I would say. It's been hard. No
From what
doubt.
I can from what I can tell with Charlie, he certainly seems to see the better nature of life.
He does. He's a great guy.
Yeah. So that I'm curious on how the two of you met, but fill me in on your
Yeah,
first trip into.
I was at Valley Hope, got kicked out, so I went to the Motel 6.
How long were you in, and how was the food?
At Valley Hope, it was a very 1 out of 10. I give it a almost 8.5.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Sauna Lake, 5.
Well,
And how long were you in Valley Hope?
Valley Hope was 12 days.
and did you go directly to Sauna Lake after that, or what happened
No,
in
I
between?
went to the guy that one of the directors at Valley Hope. I can't remember, Zach was his name, I want to say, but he drove me back to Columbia, which was about an hour drive, 45-minute drive. And my mom helped me out getting a room for about 4 days, 5 days at the Motel 6 over there off Clark Lane, I think it was. And I sat there for the 4 days, and I was like, I got to get back into treatment. I can't go back to what I've been doing. I'm gonna die. I mean, I lost probably 30 pounds, but let me go back a little bit back. So Raven committed suicide, right? So I was still on the street, and really my drinking and my using dope was really getting out there. I crossed, I think it was 63 in Columbia there on the highway. I was going to see a friend, but you had to cross the interstate. I crossed the interstate, got pretty much on the shoulder, and I look up, and they to me what I saw, I basically thought it was over. I was like, it's done. I'm dead. This is it. I got struck, got ran over. I was in the hospital for almost 2 months. 23 fractures on my right leg. Thank goodness for health insurance. I think it was about $200,000. I was there for, yeah, I think it was over that.
Wait, what'd you say, like 60 something days, I think?
Yeah, I was there for about, well, let's just say 45 days and 4 surgeries. It's pretty bad, pretty bad. But got out. Some friends in Centralia helped me out. I stayed with them to recover. You know, you would think that as a drug addict that I am, so while I was in the hospital, they were giving me Dilaudid, they were giving me Percocets every 2 hours, just feeding my addiction. And so when I got out of the hospital, going to Centralia, staying with, I'm not going to say their names, there for a good time, and for about 3 months. I was on a walker. I had a cast, what do they call it, on your boot. Going to doctors' checkups there, and they were obviously prescribing me oxycodone, which I was abusing very badly. You know, say you eat one every, I was eating 4 to 5 an hour, if not 5 or 6.
And
Drinking,
what is that experience?
it's just, you know, the feeling of opioids for me, it just gives me I guess we all have anxiety, we all have stress, some more than others. I have anxiety, and I do not want to feel that anxiety. I do not like to feel that stress, and opioids, it just gives me a warm feeling of, I don't, obviously it helps with the pain, obviously, but it just gives me a feeling of well-being. You know, I feel um, secure. And
Mhm.
it's just, I mean, it's a great feeling. I'm not gonna lie. And
And
Have you,
unfortunately, just like any other substance, Tim, the more that you take, the more you have to start taking because you build up a tolerance. And before you know it, you're not even getting high anymore. You're just taking
right.
them just to maintain,
yeah, yeah, a lot of people don't know about, they think, oh, he's an addict. Oh, he's a drug addict. He's an alcoholic. I mean, I can only speak for me, but yes, I am. You get to that point where you become addicted. A lot of people forget about, don't really look at it that way. I mean, talking to my mom, God, I love her. And again, shout out to my mom and dad. They're still around, and and she's like, you can just quit. I've heard people say to people who use nicotine, you can just quit. And it's addictive, physical addiction.
Hmm.
And for opioids, the Oxycontins, Percocets, hydrocodone, all that, you become addicted. Your body, your brain, if once you quit using it, and you just get this, it's hard to describe.
it's like you're ill and sick.
Yeah, they call it dope sick. And especially when I call it, you graduate from hydrocodone. Once you get to oxycodone, which is Percocets, OxyContin. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it the way people pronounce it, OxyContin, but yeah, you crave that drug, and you want that drug, and you will, unfortunately, if you have to, still hurt loved ones, take jewelry, clothes, stereo, now stereo systems back in the day, pawn them. I never pawned stuff, but um, yeah, you just become addicted. Same way for like benzodiazepine, Xanax. That's one of my drugs of choice. Um, I was prescribed that for a couple of years in Knoxville. From their pill mill doctors, you pay them a certain amount of money every 2 or 3 months. They write those prescriptions for you,
Hmm.
and benzo withdrawal. But yeah, Then I went
Well,
to go ahead.
I was going to say a question for both of you. Charlie, some of those medicines I think were on the list of the handful that you gave up to stay out on the water. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did, Tim, because in 2018 in June, that's when Subchapter M came
Right.
out. And I used to go to the boat. Of course, I worked 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, but I'd go to the boat with 1 week sleeves already with my pills in it, and I would put them in separate paper bags. So that way, once I got on the boat, all I'd have to do is just, it was already sorted out. It made it a lot easier for me. But in June of 2018 was the first time that I went to the boat without Effexor, Lexapro, Xanax, and opiates. And when I did,
How long were you taking those?
well, I had been on and off those for about a 20-year period that my personal doctor had kind of tweaked over the years. And at that point in time, I was taking 150 milligram of Effexor, I think 40 milligram of Lexapro. Xanax, I was getting the full footballs, the little blue jobbers are pretty potent. And then opiates, I was getting 10 milligram hydrocodone, about 100 of those a month. Well, just to stop all that cold turkey, I thought, yeah, I can do this. And I did on the boat, but buddy, it was rough. It was really rough. I thought a couple times, I thought I'm just going to have to call in and go home because I was having a tough time. But after the withdrawal period, I thought, okay, this is okay.
Was
That's
there
when
was there a
in that
noticeable change in your work quality? Because I mean, from what I've heard from all your peers, is that nobody expected that you were fighting these
right. No,
battles.
Maintaining,
right,
basically.
right. Yeah, I don't think that my work quality dropped down, but what started to happen was like, so that was in June. It was about September-ish, I guess, that maybe at that point, because maybe I guess you'd say the long-lasting effect that those antidepressants and anti-anxiety had done for me had diminished. That's when the nightmares started happening while I was on the vessel. And if the longest that you get is 4 hours, which is the case out of 30 days, the longest that you'll get consecutive is 4 hours. About 2 hours into that, sometimes I'd have one of these. I know they're called night terrors, but I'd have one, and man, I would be so fatigued from having those because my sleep would get
Mhm.
less and less. That's when on my days off I started abusing methamphetamine just to keep up at home. And then I would stop a few days before I'd have to go back to work. But yeah, those legal prescriptions I stopped from taking that the doctor prescribed me to keep my job. But ultimately, I wound up doing methamphetamine to do my job, if that makes sense.
Right.
And like Stephen was saying, when your body builds up a tolerance to some of these things, such as like the opiates and everything, when you start taking more and more in order to not be sick, you're not getting high anymore. You're just taking them just to maintain that. Like he said, I hadn't got to the point yet where I had stolen or hurt anyone, let's say. But I always say the word yet because I've met a lot of folks now in recovery, especially some older guys that still have everything, their home, their wife, their kids, and they haven't lost it yet. But it's just a matter of time, whether it be 4 years or 40 years, that if a person's addicted and then you don't have that substance, what I'm learning, Tim, in these classes that I go to every day more and more is it's your body's natural survival mode, so to speak, that and they've done studies of this on rodents, that the rodents, once they are addicted to something, they will not even drink water.
They go back to
That they will go back to these substances despite the fact that they're dehydrated. They won't eat or anything else because it's a survival skill, so to speak, that your body takes over. That a person's choice and ability to basically stay normal, you have to start stealing, let's say, or doing those things. I met a
Well,
young fellow in inpatient that gave me a lot of insight because he had been homeless and he was, I think, 22. But what he told me was, he said, going on the street, he says, that caused me to become a thief. And I said, how so? He said, well, like one night, he goes, I'm laying down and I had my few things in my pocket and my blanket. And he says, my blanket was stolen from me while I was sleeping. he got up, didn't have a blanket anymore. He said, so in order for me to survive, I had to go steal the money or steal a blanket or something in order to have that, because he didn't have an income, so to speak. And that's kind of how it leads into going that far down in that spiral. So I think that sometimes people can say, oh, well, I didn't hit bottom that bad because I still have everything. But yet you got to look at the similarities. I mean, if your life becomes unmanageable due to the drugs, meaning it affects your work, it affects your social life, it affects your family, it affects your financial status. That's when you know, like, man, I got something going on here. I got to get looked at, you know. And that was my case for those 15 years or so. I guess I stayed even keeled being on pharmaceuticals that were prescribed and taking alcohol. That kind of kept me on an even keel. I still performed my job fine. I was still a great father, in my opinion, did what I could for my son. But once I stopped those, that's when I didn't really realize how much they had been helping me. And that's like just yesterday, I saw one of the psychiatrists yesterday at inpatient, or excuse me, at outpatient. And she asked me, well, how are these little anxiety meds working? One particular med is called Boost Par. It's for anxiety. I said, Doc, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it does a damn thing. They're like taking Tic Tacs for me. But I am taking them every day, you know, because I don't know at this point which ones that if you were to stop taking that are going to make you feel those feelings again that you don't want to feel, why you numb yourself with substances, because that's what it's all about, man. It's like Steve said, it's not, they call alcoholism, which alcohol is a drug, it's in itself. So that's an addiction. But they say that alcoholism is a drinking disease. Most of the people that I've met that are addicts in the last, I've almost been clean now, 6 months. I'm going to say 95% of them have what they call comorbidities, dual diagnosis. There's an underlying reason why they're addicted to substances. So you'll have like a substance abuse counselor, but you also need to have a mental health counselor to find out the underlying reasons why you would use these things and continue to use them despite knowing you have negative consequences, because the drugs were the solution. That solved our problems. It solved Steve from being in pain, solved me from having night terrors, so the drugs were the solution, but it's not a healthy solution. So finding out and tapping into why and feeling those feelings, man, when they come out, like I'm feeling shit right now in my life, dude, that I never even knew I would get upset about or get nervous about. Why? Because I'm feeling them naturally now for the first time, and I'll think, why am I feeling like this? But I'm learning I'm going to have to in order to detach from these things, because if you just keep pushing them down and pushing them down with drugs and numbing yourself, they still stay in your body, these different issues, whether they be past traumas, as they call them, or whatever, that if you don't deal with these things and you just keep suppressing them with drugs and legal prescriptions and booze, eventually they're going to come out. And that's what I think part of recovery is, and why I'm still in this housing, because I got my own house. I'd rather I won't say it on the air, I'd rather do something else than be here. But I know for my own safety and health, it's good for me to be here, because my life right now is like this. It's not linear. You're going to have valleys and high points because you're feeling things for the first time. Like I'm going to be 50 next year for the first time that you've never felt before. You're like, man, what is this shit? Or like when my buddy died last month, that was my first time going to a funeral without being able to have a trunk full of beer or, a joint in my pocket or cocaine or whatever to say, oh yeah, he's a good guy, clean glasses afterwards, go to the bar, to actually feel that, man, it's different for an addict, I believe, because these are things that we haven't really had to experience clean and sober before. But Steve, so I had a question though about Steve's story going on. When did so you were in Columbia and you got ran over by the car. When and how did you end up in Denver, Missouri in the Sauna Lake inpatient?
Right. So I got hit on, I think it was on 63. They took me to the University Hospital. And then I guess the doctors at Boone County Hospital in Columbia, I guess the doctor there was more in tune of the injuries I had. So I was there at University Hospital, Mizzou for 3 days, 72 hours maybe. And then they transferred me over to Boone. And I did the almost 6 weeks there. And how I got to Dittmer. But anyway, so I stayed with my friends in where's that? Centralia. My addiction, they just pretty much, I wore my welcome out there. Let's just put it out that way. And I was driven back to Columbia, stayed at a Motel 6 for there it was. I went to Valley Hope. That didn't work out. Back to Columbia. I went to the aviary, did that program, stayed at the house there on the site. It was called the Brick House for about 8 days.
That's another high rated treatment center, also
Yeah,
Tim, for what that's worth in Missouri, the aviary.
Yeah, the aviary.
And
I do not recommend that one.
well, through all this time, Stephen, you're clean and sober?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I got some information. I was out there at the aviary. Where that is, you might know where it is.
Yeah, it's in Eolia, Missouri.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it. It's just too much Missouri stuff for me. But so I got into Sauna Lake in Kansas City, where I really, back in 2000, this was what, 2022, I guess?
And that was initially the reason why you came to Missouri.
Yeah, my goal was to get to Kansas City. And so I can't remember his name. He drove the van for Sauna Lake. He picked me up there at the aviary, drove me to Kansas City. And we were right there above the, I don't know if you're familiar with Kansas City at all, where all the shops are. I think call it something.
He's in Baton Rouge. And also just something noteworthy, Sauna Lake no longer has a facility in Kansas City. I didn't even know that they did.
Yeah, but I was there for about 7 months, clean and sober. And I relapsed.
In Sauna Lake?
Yeah.
You were in there 7 months?
Yeah.
Wow.
You relapsed within that program?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the girl that was running the house, in Kansas City, I went to Dittmer. And that's how I got introduced to Dittmer.
And that's a Sauna Lake facility. And to my knowledge, Tim, that's the only inpatient facility that they have remaining, because they had one in Kansas City, and to my knowledge, they closed that. But the one out in the country that I went to, that's what Stephen is referring to as Dittmer, Missouri. That's their main residential inpatient place.
Is that where y'all met?
No.
Okay.
So I was there for 38 days, left. Well, and then I actually, relapsed again, went back.
What was it opioids again each time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And went back, did another 30, I think it was 32 days. And while I was in there, the Sauna Lake in Kansas City closed. I mean, they just shut it down. I don't know all the politics behind it. So pretty much I got all the information. And I don't blame my mom and dad, my family. At that time, they just didn't want me to come back. And I don't blame them. I was still using. I wouldn't say I was taking recovery seriously. I was just, I don't know, trying to find myself in my recovery while I was working recovery. So I was like, yeah, let's hit it. Let's go to, St. Louis. And that's how I got incorporated here in Del Mar in St. Louis.
That's our housing facility here,
Yeah.
which is where we met in January of this year on January 22nd is when I moved in to the apartment that Steve's been in for over a year.
Yeah, I've been here 600. I'm clean and sober 673
Some odd days.
days, going on 2 years.
And what's your count right now today, Charlie?
Mine, I got right at 5.5 months. On the 11th of May is when I'll have 6 months. So
Okay,
in a couple more weeks, I got
Yeah.
5.5 months right now.
sure. We're almost there.
Yeah, it's just you just got to take it a day at a time. You know, recovery. You know, we didn't become addicts and alcoholics overnight. It was years of buildup from using and a lot of stuff that why we became addicts. Um, Trying to suppress stuff that maybe we have problems with in society, our behavior, stuff like that.
Well, what was the situation? And you may have mentioned it, but you've covered a lot of ground here in a relatively short time, I think. But what was your life condition, I guess, right before, I guess, homelessness? What led you there?
At that time, I was just, I wouldn't say I was suicidal. I kind of, I failed at being a dad as a son. I was looking to just die. Some of me, part of me, but right now, I wish that car would have killed me.
Hmm.
I know that feeling.
Somehow, I believe my higher power is Lord Jesus Christ. Maybe I'm not ready to, I don't know. Maybe he has plans for me, but I failed and I've let my kids down, and it's really hard.
You want to tell me about your kids?
Yeah, I've got two. Kellen James Ledbetter. He's 25. He turned 25 April 21st. He lives in Knoxville, Tennessee. Both my sons, McCain, Andrew Ledbetter, he's 22. They graduated high school. They had a few problems, going through high school, but they graduated, working on, they're going to college part time. And they have a 2-bedroom apartment there in Knoxville. And, with their grandpa, which that's my dad, and my mom, and my sister is thinking about moving back to Knoxville herself. Pretty close family. Yeah, I love my kids a lot.
Yeah, it's got to be tough, and I've seen him for what, 5 or 6 years at this point.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a big Chiefs fan. I love the Kansas City Chiefs a lot. I'm a diehard. I love sports.
I won't hold that
Um,
against you.
we were going to go a couple of years ago. We were going to go to Arrowhead and see a game, but that fell through. Um, but there's a part of me where maybe I'm I've got a temper. Um, there's stuff in society I think is I'll catch myself. I'll say the world sucks. It's crap. Really, the world's beautiful. I just feel as a society as a whole is a bunch of bullshit.
Well, your
Democrats,
your
Republicans, you
your
know,
perspective is not one that I have or have had on any of the podcasts I've done. So I'm eager to hear more. What do you
I just feel
how do you see
society.
society today?
I think it's crap. I don't know. I didn't used to, since I've been here now going on 2 years here at Del Mar here in St. Louis. I've been watching a lot of YouTube and just checking stuff out. I don't know if um, something I would like to talk to you about. I kind of want to get into what you're doing. My
Sure.
youngest son, McCain, he's big into sports. I wouldn't mind doing a sports type thing and also doing recovery, but I don't know if you followed the thing going in Frisco, Texas. Have you seen that where
Mm,
that African black kid stabbed that kid in the chest? You ought to check
okay.
it out.
Okay.
Well, the white kid died, 17 years old.
Austin Metcalf.
Yeah, and the black kid, I'm not gonna say his name. they got into a shouting match and this and that, but verbally, and he stabbed the white kid, and he got locked up. He's charged with murder, and now he's got a go get me fund, which I think's odd as in itself, and it's up to about $500,000 supporting. I didn't know they hated whites so bad. I'm not really racist. I like Charlie here is kind of, he could probably put it out there better than I can, but I just look at society. It's just bad. It's bad, man.
Well, and something that I've noticed with Steve, and this is, and we've talked about this already, so he knows anything I say is out of love. I'm not doing it to belittle, is that I think that his view is a little more cynical in the fact that when he sees, especially someone like, say, younger than 30, that there's certain expectations that he would expect just because that's the way, he was brought up. That's the way he raised his kids. And that's what he thinks other people should do, and I can understand that. And I told him this because I was cynical. I was the same way. It takes one to know one. I used to think to myself, like a guy walking down the street with his pants halfway down around his ass and on the phone thinking,
they call that sagging.
Yeah, like I would think, what a loser, right? And that used to be my mindset. I used to think those things out loud to my son, even. That now I've changed, and it wasn't like an automatic thing overnight. It was something that took time and practice of living that way in order to become that way, to where now if I do see someone walking down the street with their pants halfway down or on their phone, or I don't let it bother me. I figure that's them. I don't know their story. I don't know. I mean, it could be one of the greatest people in the world, and I'm just sitting here automatically judging them off of what they're doing or the way that they dress. And so I think that Stephen, in my opinion, is still kind of caught in that, I guess you'd say, mindset that, okay, like for example, let's say someone were to move in with us right now, let's say another housemate. And if it's the type of person that just puts dishes in the sink at night, dirty.
I've had my share of problems here in the past year, almost 2 years.
Yeah, that, Stephen, he doesn't have a problem of saying very, in an abrasive way, hey man, what the fuck are you doing? Type of thing, where I understand Stephen's frustration the same, because I used to be that way, that I would approach it completely different in the way that he would. He's approaching it with an attitude that's not bad. It's just different. I think in today's society that he'd be like, man, what is wrong with you? Are you brainless? Is your mom completely dumb? Type of a way of thinking. And I know that because I used to be that way. That now I approach it completely different, because I don't know what's in a younger person's mind. I don't know why they do the things that they do, but my approach to them would be, I guess you'd say, with a little more diplomacy and with kid gloves, just because that's the way that I am now. But it took me a while to get this way. It took me running a boat, say, sometimes running in the captain's position with a crew of, say, 12 to 15 people, that I couldn't be that way anymore. If there was a young fellow that caught the boat, I mean, this even happened. I'll give you just a quick story. This guy, he caught the boat once, and he was told to come up and make coffee in the pilot house, which is a routine thing that happens every 6 hours. And I was busy running the vessel, and I'm going down the river. Yeah, man. And I'm not paying attention to this kid, right? I'm kind of focused on what I'm doing at that point in time. But he goes, hey, Cap, how much coffee you normally put in here? I said, oh, just one scoop. I go back, man, and I go to looking at what he did. He's like, I screwed something up, and I got in a straight stretch, and I went to the back of the pilot house. It was a Bunn coffee maker, and where you normally put water into the machine is where he put the coffee grounds. He didn't know, right? Out of ignorance. He's a 21-year-old man who's never had to make coffee. He's never made coffee a day in his life. And so the days of me assuming that a young man knows how to make coffee knows how to do his laundry and all that stuff. I had to put all that to the wayside and realize that there are some folks that when they grow up, they aren't taught those things. They aren't taught how to wash their clothes. They aren't taught how to cook. And so I had to approach that more of like from a fatherly or even grandfatherly aspect and say to myself, okay, although this person's 22, I have to approach this in a way that they're 5 years old, not in a belittling way, but in a way that they really are ignorant. They don't know. And
What
that's
year?
what changed my mindset, Tim.
What year would that have been when you had that coffee experience in the wheelhouse?
This would have been starting, this would have been about, I'm going to say 15 to 20 years ago. And it was something that was slow of my development, I guess you'd say, of changing my mindset. Um, it was a gradual process, but it was one that I knew I needed to make if I were to do things like, say, run a drill on a boat, a fire drill, a flooding drill, or to communicate with the crew, say for a safety meeting, to where I had to put my personal beliefs and the way that I was raised aside. And like I say, not in a belittling or a demeaning way, that I had to start approaching crew members as if they were, young children. I'm talking like 5 or 6, and assume they don't know anything. That's where I had to put my mind. And I would often ask, okay, do you know how to make coffee? Do you know how to do your laundry? And I wouldn't ask that in a belittling way. I would ask that in a genuine fatherly way, because some of these cats just did not know. I mean, they're coming from a mom and dad who maybe, let's say, cater to them in every form and fashion, where they don't know, or to just have basic respect. Like some of the things I noticed with Steve is, he and I are the type of person, yes or no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. That's the way that we were raised, But if younger folks, or say if folks even our age that weren't raised that way, I got to put my beliefs and things aside and realize these are people that came from a whole different environment than what I did,
Well, yeah,
And so
back
I
in
think that a lot of times that's where Steve, I'm not going to say that he falls short, but I think that maybe he's trying to work on, because it takes a cynic to know one. It's kind of like you mentioned a year ago, Tim, that someone had called me a narcissist. And I'm like, what's a narcissist? And you told me oftentimes it takes one to know one, that maybe the person telling me that was one, that's how I think maybe in a lot of ways that we kind of, I guess you'd say, bounce off one another, Steve and I, that we help each other, because physically there are a lot of things right now with my constant aches and fatigue and cramping that I'm not able to do, that he helps me with. And he'll say, hey man, just slow down, take a breath for a minute. And I realize, wow, maybe I'm not breathing. I'm taking the mind of like a 20-year-old man with a 50-year-old body trying to do things I couldn't do. But I do the same thing with him. When he starts to get upset with someone, I'll be like, right, Steve, maybe you need to take a breath, buddy, and just chill out, because you're going to get yourself upset over, like he mentioned, watching YouTube, over watching a story of like he said, a young man who was stabbed in the heart because he asked the guy to move. That bothers me too, just as much as it does Steve. But Steve's mindset is, okay, what's wrong with his parents? Why do people not automatically see that this kid ought to be locked up for the rest of his life? That I'm taking it as it comes, because I have no expectations at this point from anyone when it comes to courtesy, when it comes to what I think they should do on a daily, regular basis, on how other folks live.
Yeah, it's just, my aggressive behavior is just something I'm working on. I don't have a filter. I'm trying to pull one up here to slow down, like Charlie said, be able to approach somebody differently. It's just, even before using, substances, I was an aggressive child. I don't know.
And Steve mentioned, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we were at it, we were somewhere together in the recovery world, but like someone had bumped up next to me or something. I said, oh, I'm sorry, whether it was my fault or not, just to excuse myself, meaning I didn't mean to bump into you. Steve said, man, like that. He goes, I don't say that kind of shit. Fuck them. He says, I just keep on walking.
Move.
Yeah. And I think that what he's saying too is like, even say one of these younger fellows, if they move in within a day, that if they do or don't do something that maybe Steve feels like is unethical, that he has no problem saying, man, what the fuck's wrong with you? Where I wouldn't approach someone in that manner. Not to say that Steve's wrong. It's just a different mindset.
Yeah, it's just something I need to work on. And like Charlie said, everybody comes from different backgrounds, and some people have never made their bed. Get up in the morning, leave their bed a mess, leave stuff in the sink. I have OCD. As a child, my mom will tell me, "You lived like that." I don't know. I got to where I guess when I got married, Cindy was working a lot. She was a nuclear engineer. I can't think where she worked, but the reactor out there near Knoxville, Tennessee, there in Tennessee. I to go back, I was a stay-at-home dad for about a year, cleaning the house. I had two Rottweilers, two little boys.
We're running a tight ship.
Yeah, and just cleaning the house, cleaning up after the dogs because Rottweilers shed, and getting the kids to take their naps. That's a lot of work. House moms, housewives, I guess you want them. It's a tough job, man. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
But I was ready to go back to work after my mom kind of retired, and like I said, my mom, grandma, and grandpa, they helped out a lot. I'm really thankful and grateful for them.
Well,
But
there you are.
yeah.
Well, Stephen, you mentioned, I think, a little while ago that you had some questions about my project, kind of what I'm doing, or some feedback.
Yeah, I want to, like I said, I watch YouTube a lot. Before I go to bed, I'll get on my phone, social media, a lot of, like I'm big into sports. I love sports, NFL, college football, fell out of baseball. NBA is I just don't get into disc culture. It's not like when Jordan was playing, it's just totally different now. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm big into football. Let's just say that. And I notice there's a lot of cats out there on YouTube. They're in their mid 30s and, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs and NFL in general. And it's something I'd like to do. Definitely.
And something I mentioned to Steve was like, because I mean, I'm not exactly a wizard when it comes to computers, but Steve's kind of a dinosaur when it comes to this kind of stuff. That I was telling him, I said, if you really want to do that, you could start a thing where even though your son's in Tennessee, that you and him could both be on the screen together, just throwing just a little debate around about sports and whatnot. And so that's when he asked me, he says, man, I want to get with that dude, Tim, and see what I would have to do that. And I said, he'd be the guy to ask because I don't know.
It's very simple. If you got, $150 a year, this Zoom thing you can record up to, I don't know how many hours, but yeah, no, it's some work, and there's some equipment you need to have, or at least that I need to have. Other people do things differently, but the process I'm using, it doesn't cost you all that much, and
like a laptop, microphone. What
yeah,
else?
no, the Zoom account is the biggest thing, but I mean, these were probably 20 something on Amazon, and
right.
it's not too hard to set up. It's just a matter of growing and gathering a following. I was telling Charlie before you walked in,
It's like subscribers.
It's all subscription driven, numbers driven. It's all data.
Likes, following.
It's just data analytics, and YouTube and Spotify and all those digital platforms. You make money when you draw attention, and you generate usage. That's why I was telling Charlie before you walked in. Our last episode published a week ago, 3 hours long. Well, it's gotten over 50 hours of viewing already, which is
great.
It's pretty big for my channel. It's not huge as far as YouTube's concerned. It's barely anything. It's a blip.
Something I'd like to do, sports, do some recovery online, maybe get followers doing that. An hour, maybe 2 hours a day, doing book work, stuff like that.
My brother-in-law actually runs a sports podcast.
What's his name?
Blake Ruffino. It's Are You Serious Sports Network on YouTube.
I'll check it out.
He publishes constantly.
And,
He's some,
Tim could probably text you a link or something.
Yeah, definitely.
You know.
Yeah.
I can do that right now, actually.
But yeah, Charlie's been like a breath of fresh air. I knew when I met him, I could tell I liked his etiquette, the way he was doing things. Um, he just had integrity, and I'm really grateful of people that serve this country, because to be quite honest, what I see from society, I don't know if I would serve for some of the people that, I don't know. It'd be hard for me. It would. I think people are here in America are ungrateful, selfish, jerks.
well,
It's all about me.
there is that thought today. It's certainly, I think, from my own experience, the perception of the military from September 11th forward has, well, I say that because after Vietnam, there was a lot of negative feedback to that group of people. Maybe it's cyclical, but I feel like from the end of the Bush era into the Obama era, I think it kept, there was a distance created between the public and the military, um, at least through the media. But,
Right.
you know, I don't often consider that because it was just sort of a condition of my life. I was in 2001, I was 15,
Uh-huh.
when that happened.
Right. Oh, I
So
remember that. I remember the day like it was yesterday.
yeah, no, they were playing it in homeroom and I think first period in high school, you know. Um, and then it was just all of a sudden we go to war. And then when I graduate high school, my brother joins the army. He's over in Afghanistan a couple times. And anyway,
Yeah.
it's been a weird ride for sure on that note. But getting back to the podcast, what all have you seen on the channel?
Oh goodness. Let's see. There's a guy, the sports going into the sport, Uncle Lou. I don't know. I think he's out of Georgia, Augusta, maybe. Um, there's two guys. They have a podcast called All Chiefs Up. They're two brothers. They live in Kentucky. If you get into football, and especially the Chiefs, you definitely should check them out. It's Mike and Steve. Yeah, All Chiefed Up. Uncle Lou. Let's see. There's guys. Cole. He has a big long beard like Charlie. He's probably in his 30s, bald, shaved head. He's really good. We've been watching again a lot of that stuff that happened in Frisco. There's just I'm in politics. I'm in basically. My whole life I've been kind of independent, I guess. Sheer to the left, sheer to the right. But as of the last, probably in recovery, the last pretty much 2 years, I veer more to the Republican side, I would say. So saying that, getting on YouTube, looking up these podcasts, these platforms, it seems like I get a lot of uh, far right stuff. That girl, what's her name, with long, pretty brown hair? Gosh, what is her name? She goes to campuses, and
Oh, Caitlin Bennett
Caitlin Bennett.
on Liberty TV, I think.
Yeah,
it is.
Liberty TV. Shoot. Gosh.
Yeah, yeah. If
Officer Tatum. I know you ought to check him out. He's pretty good.
All right.
Really
what
good.
what Steve is speaking of there also are kind of those, they're conservative podcasts in terms of politics and the way people are in society. But Caitlin Bennett, she'll go out to these different universities that are protesting, and she just wants to have good debate back and forth with people of the opposite mindset just to find out what they're thinking. And Steve's kind of into that in addition to the sports stuff. So
But yeah, as growing up, like I said, my dad and Grandpa as he goes by now, because they really helped out, so pretty much that's his name. James Ledbetter, growing up, he was always watching CNN when he wasn't, he made himself successful in the insurance business, some real estate stuff. But when he was at home, I always noticed he was watching CNN. I always heard him say, "People who watch Fox are a bunch of dumbasses." Da 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 da. And when I was married at the time, we moved back from Syracuse. We had a TV in the kitchen. I usually cooked when I was at home for my wife, for Cindy and the kids. I always had it on Fox. I liked O'Reilly at the time. So O'Reilly Factor, that was what, 2001, 2002, three, something like that. But as of the last 2 years, really, I support Trump. I really do. Personally, he's probably not the greatest person, but you to tell me that Kamala Harris could do a better job than him? Come on.
Well, I'm not here to argue those merits, but I didn't care much for either option.
Well, and I think also maybe what Steve's trying to, I guess relay is his personal views tend to be that of the conservative, of the right. And it's not so much of the conservative party as conservative thoughts,
Right.
of some of the basic traditional things within the country that should stay traditional, not be changed, so to speak,
Yeah.
Oh, and where do you find yourself, Charlie, in the political spectrum? I don't know that we've ever really talked about that.
Yeah, I've never really brought up politics much, just because I know that it can cause.
It's kind of in recovery. You don't, like a bar,
Politics and religion.
and there's another one. But
Yeah, I've always heard it's wise to avoid in polite conversation at work. But that does get me back to you, Charlie. We caught up a little bit on the phone. Did you want to discuss kind of what's been going on with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You want me to leave you guys?
No, man, that's up to you. I mean, I'll just go ahead and point it this way, but yeah, you're welcome to come and go as you want, buddy. You won't bother me. Yeah. Steve and I guess you'd say that he's about my closest, person at this point, because I haven't seen my son, since I moved here. It's been 3 months, and,
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.